Think about someone you know who seems sharper, more present, more mentally alert than most people their age. Someone in their 70s whose conversation is still quick, whose stories are detailed, whose memory for names and faces still surprises you. You probably assume they are just lucky, good genes, good fortune. Maybe they won the cognitive lottery. But what the research increasingly shows, and what most people are never told clearly enough, is that memory in your 60s, 70s, and 80s is far less determined by genetics than by the daily inputs your brain is receiving. And one of the most powerful of those inputs is something you have complete control over, starting with your very next meal. I am Dr. Hayes Anderson, and after 22 years in senior health, I have seen firsthand how often cognitive decline gets attributed to inevitable aging, when the real driver is a nutritional environment that the brain has been quietly starving in for years. And I have seen what happens when that environment changes. Here is what we are doing today. I have identified 5 specific foods, backed by the most consistent body of research in brain nutrition science, that seniors should be eating every single week to protect their memory, support the structural health of the brain, and reduce the biological risk factors that drive cognitive decline. I have ranked them from significant to the one at the end that I need you to hear, because it is the food with the most direct, most well-documented impact on the aging brain, and most people over 60 are not eating nearly enough of it. I also need to warn you right now about food number 3, because there is a preparation mistake that most people make with it that eliminates almost all of its cognitive benefit. You will not want to miss that. Stay with me to the end, and I will also give you 5 specific, practical things you can do this week to put all of this into action. But before the 5 foods, I need to explain something about why the brain is uniquely vulnerable after 60, and why what you eat has more power over your cognitive trajectory than almost anything else you can control. Your brain is the most metabolically demanding organ in your body. It represents roughly 2% of your body weight, but it consumes approximately 20% of your total daily energy. It is running constantly, maintaining billions of neural connections, clearing waste products, repairing cellular damage, producing the chemical signals that regulate everything from your mood to your memories. And it does all of this on what you feed it. After 60, 3 specific biological processes converge to make the brain increasingly vulnerable. Chronic low-grade inflammation damages the fine network of blood vessels that supply brain tissue. Oxidative stress, the accumulation of cellular damage from unstable molecules called free radicals, erodes the membranes of brain cells and disrupts their ability to communicate. And a process called neuroinflammation, inflammation specifically within the brain tissue itself, impairs the function of the support cells that keep neurons healthy and helps clear the toxic protein accumulations that are a hallmark of neurodegenerative disease. The foods I am about to describe address these 3 mechanisms directly. They are not general health foods that might benefit the brain as a side effect. They are foods with documented specific mechanisms of action in brain tissue, compounds that cross the blood-brain barrier, reduce neuroinflammation, support the structural integrity of neurons, and in some cases have been shown in human trials to slow measurable cognitive decline. These are not supplements, they are foods. And the difference between having them in your diet regularly and not having them is a difference that compounds quietly and powerfully over years. Food 5, dark leafy greens, spinach, kale, Swiss chard. The research on leafy greens and cognitive aging is among the most consistent in nutritional neuroscience, and it starts with a finding that genuinely surprised researchers when it first emerged from a large-scale study tracking hundreds of older adults over several years. The people who ate the most leafy greens, just 1 to 2 servings daily, showed cognitive aging that was roughly 11 years slower than those who ate the least. Not a small difference. 11 years. The people in the highest intake group had brains that functioned cognitively like people more than a decade younger than those in the lowest intake group. Same chronological age, dramatically different biological age of the brain. The mechanisms are multiple. Leafy greens are one of the richest dietary sources of folate, a B vitamin essential for the production of neurotransmitters and for the metabolism of homocysteine, an amino acid that, when elevated, has been independently linked in multiple large studies to accelerated brain atrophy and increased dementia risk. People with chronically elevated homocysteine show measurable brain shrinkage on imaging studies, actual visible loss of brain volume at a faster rate than those with normal homocysteine levels. Folate, along with B12 and B6, is essential for keeping homocysteine in check, and leafy greens are the single most potent dietary source of folate available. Leafy greens are also rich in lutein and zeaxanthin, compounds that cross the blood-brain barrier and accumulate in brain tissue, where they appear to protect against neuroinflammation and support the white matter pathways that allow different regions of the brain to communicate quickly and accurately. And they are dense sources of vitamin K1, which plays a role in the production of sphingolipids, fats that are structural components of the myelin sheaths surrounding neurons in the brain. A serving of cooked spinach, kale, or Swiss chard 2 to 3 times a week is the starting point. Here is the detail that matters. Raw greens and cooked greens are not equal for these purposes. Cooking breaks down the cell walls and dramatically increases the bioavailability of lutein and many of the fat-soluble protective compounds. And those fat-soluble compounds require a fat source in the same meal to be absorbed. A drizzle of olive oil over wilted spinach is not a culinary preference. It is a delivery mechanism. Without the fat, you are absorbing a fraction of what these greens contain. Food 4. Blueberries and dark berries. Blueberries are extraordinarily rich in anthocyanins, the deep blue-purple pigments that, once absorbed, cross the blood-brain barrier and accumulate in the hippocampus and other brain regions associated with learning and memory. The hippocampus is the brain's primary memory formation center. It is also one of the first regions to show atrophy in age-related cognitive decline and in Alzheimer's disease. And it is one of the few regions in the adult brain that retains the ability to generate new neurons, a process called neurogenesis that appears to be directly supported by the anthocyanins in blueberries. Human studies, not just animal studies, actual human studies, have shown that regular blueberry consumption over periods of 12 to 16 weeks produces measurable improvements in memory performance in older adults with early cognitive decline. Researchers have measured faster reaction times, improved verbal memory, and better word recall in the blueberry group compared to controls. The mechanism goes beyond neurogenesis. Anthocyanins are potent anti-inflammatory compounds, specifically within the brain's vascular system. They support the health of the tiny blood vessels that supply the brain, reducing the endothelial dysfunction and small vessel disease that underlies the vast majority of vascular dementia. And they appear to support the signaling pathways between neurons that are essential for the process of memory consolidation. Half a cup of fresh or frozen blueberries several times a week is the threshold most human studies have used. Frozen blueberries retain their anthocyanin content well. The mistake to avoid is diluting them in high-sugar smoothies or pairing them with sweetened yogurt. A blood sugar spike in the same meal creates a brief oxidative environment that partially counteracts the antioxidant benefit. Simple pairings work best. A small handful of walnuts, a spoonful of plain Greek yogurt, or a modest portion of full-fat, unsweetened dairy. Let me tell you about Elaine, 73 years old, a retired librarian who came to my office genuinely frightened. For about 18 months, she had been experiencing word retrieval problems that were worsening. Common words that had always come to her instantly were now arriving with a delay that felt deeply wrong. She had watched her father go through cognitive decline and was convinced she was seeing the same beginning in herself. Her neurological evaluation was reassuring. Her cognition was functionally intact. But the pattern was real, and we both knew it was worth taking seriously. Among several nutritional and lifestyle changes we made together, we added consistent berries and leafy greens to her daily eating. 6 months later, Elaine told me the word retrieval had improved. Not perfectly, but noticeably. The pausing that had been frightening her was less frequent and less pronounced. I cannot attribute that to any single change, but the research tells me those foods were doing work. Food 3, fatty fish, and the preparation mistake that cancels the benefit. This is the one I warned you about. The omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA, found most abundantly in fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, and trout, are structural components of brain cell membranes. Your brain is approximately 60% fat by dry weight, and DHA in particular makes up a significant proportion of the fat content in the neurons of your cerebral cortex, the region responsible for complex thought, planning, language, and conscious memory. These fatty acids are building materials for the brain, and if they are not present in adequate supply, the brain substitutes other, less functional fats into its cell membranes, producing membranes that are stiffer, less fluid, and less able to support the rapid signal transmission that memory and cognition depend on. Research consistently links higher blood levels of DHA to slower cognitive decline, lower risk of dementia, and measurably better performance on memory and processing speed tests in older adults. A comprehensive analysis of multiple long-term studies found that people with the highest omega-3 levels showed significantly lower rates of brain atrophy over time on imaging scans. Their brains were physically better preserved. And higher DHA levels are associated with reduced levels of the inflammatory markers that drive neurodegeneration. Now, the preparation mistake that cancels the benefit. Fatty fish is most commonly consumed fried, baked with heavy coatings, or from canned varieties packed in refined soybean or vegetable oil. Frying in omega-6 rich oils does two harmful things simultaneously. First, it destroys a significant portion of the EPA and DHA in the fish through oxidation at high heat, the very compounds you are eating the fish to obtain. Second, the omega-6 fats absorbed during frying directly compete with omega-3s for the same metabolic pathways, partially blocking their anti-inflammatory effects. You can eat fried fish twice a week and receive a fraction of the cognitive benefit of the same amount of fish poached, baked without coating, grilled gently, or from cans packed in water rather than vegetable oil. Sardines packed in water or olive oil are one of the most concentrated, affordable, and practical sources of EPA and DHA available to seniors. A single small can provides over 1 gram of combined EPA and DHA. 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week, prepared without frying and without omega-6 oils, is the target that aligns with the research showing meaningful cognitive protection. Food 2, Walnuts. Walnuts are the only tree nut with a substantial amount of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically ALA, the plant precursor your body partially converts into EPA and DHA. But the cognitive case for walnuts goes considerably beyond their omega-3 content. A large-scale human study following thousands of older adults over time found that those who consumed walnuts regularly showed significantly better performance on multiple tests of cognitive function, including memory, processing speed, and mental flexibility. The walnut group was not consuming large amounts. The benefit appeared at approximately 1 ounce, roughly a small handful, several times a week. Walnuts contain a specific combination of compounds that appear to work synergistically on the brain. Alpha-linolenic acid contributes to the anti-inflammatory environment. Polyphenols, particularly elagitannins, reduce oxidative stress in brain tissue. Melatonin in walnuts crosses the blood-brain barrier and may help protect neurons from oxidative damage. And vitamin E in walnuts, specifically the gamma-tocopherol form, has been studied for its ability to protect the lipid-rich membranes of neurons from oxidative degradation, the exact type of damage that accumulates in aging brain tissue over time. There is also a gut-brain dimension. Walnuts are prebiotic, preferentially feeding beneficial gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids with anti-inflammatory effects extending to the brain. Let me tell you about George, 77 years old, a retired teacher whose wife had been urging him to see me for several months. His complaint was not dramatic memory loss. It was a loss of the mental sharpness he had always prided himself on. He used to read a complex novel and remember characters and plot threads across 300 pages without effort. Now he found himself rereading passages he had just finished. He had stopped attempting the crossword puzzles that had been a daily habit for 40 years because the words simply were not coming as they used to. Among the changes we made to his diet over the following months, walnuts became a daily staple, a small handful every morning with breakfast. At his 6-month follow-up, George told me the crosswords were back. Not every word, not every day, but back. He said it felt like a connection that had gone loose had been tightened. Food 1. Extra virgin olive oil, the most directly documented food for the aging brain. This is the one I have been building toward. The landmark PREDIMED study, one of the largest and most rigorously designed nutrition intervention trials ever conducted, assigned thousands of adults at cardiovascular risk to different dietary groups, one of which followed a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil. The cognitive findings that emerged as researchers continued following participants were striking. The group consuming extra virgin olive oil showed significantly better preservation of cognitive function over time, including in the domains of memory, verbal fluency, and executive function. And subsequent analysis found measurably lower rates of mild cognitive impairment progression in this group. The key compound responsible for much of this effect is oleocanthal, a polyphenol found only in high-quality extra virgin olive oil and completely absent in refined olive oil or light olive oil. Oleocanthal has a specific biological property, unlike anything else in the standard diet. Research has shown that it supports the brain's own waste clearance system, including the glymphatic drainage pathway that removes toxic protein accumulations, including the amyloid beta plaques associated with Alzheimer's pathology. It appears to do this through multiple mechanisms, enhancing the activity of the enzymes that break down amyloid, supporting the integrity of the blood-brain barrier, and reducing the neuroinflammation that impairs the clearance process. In animal models and in human observational data, regular consumption of oleocanthal-rich olive oil is associated with lower amyloid burden in brain tissue and lower rates of cognitive decline over time. But, and this is critical, oleocanthal is not present in all olive oil. It is present in freshly pressed, minimally processed extra virgin olive oil. It is highly sensitive to heat, light, and oxidation. The refined olive oil in a clear, undated bottle that has been sitting on a shelf for 2 years contains minimal to none of it. The olive oil heated to high temperatures in cooking has lost most of it. Extra virgin olive oil used as a finishing drizzle over cooked vegetables, over fish, into salads, over eggs after cooking, preserves the oleocanthal. Heat destroys it. The practical target from the Predimed data is approximately 4 tablespoons of high-quality extra virgin olive oil daily. Drizzling it generously over vegetables, using it as a salad dressing base, and adding it to dishes after cooking can get you there without dramatic changes to how you eat. The olive oil should come in a dark bottle with a harvest date on the label and be less than 18 months from harvest. If it does not taste slightly peppery or pungent at the back of your throat, that sensation is the oleocanthal itself. It is likely too old or too refined to be providing the cognitive protection you are eating it for. I want to close with something I think about often in my work with older patients. The brain has a remarkable property that most people are never given adequate reason to believe in. Neuroplasticity, the ability of brain tissue to adapt, to form new connections, to respond to the environment it is given, does not stop after a certain age. It slows. It requires better conditions. It needs more consistent support, but it does not stop. The research on these 5 foods is not primarily about preventing a disease that was going to happen anyway. It is about providing the biological conditions that allow the brain's own repair and maintenance processes to work, and to keep working longer and more effectively than they would in their absence. You have more influence over your cognitive trajectory than the standard aging narrative ever gave you reason to believe. These 5 foods are not magic, but they are consistent, documented, biologically plausible ways to shift the daily input your brain receives. And over years and decades, that shift matters in ways that are measurable and real. 5 things you can do this week. First, add cooked leafy greens to 3 meals this week. Not raw salad alone, cooked spinach, kale, or Swiss chard finished with a drizzle of olive oil. 2 to 3 servings a week is the minimum. More is better. Second, put half a cup of blueberries or dark berries into your daily eating. Frozen is fine and often more consistent than fresh. Pair them with something containing a small amount of fat, a few walnuts, a spoonful of plain full-fat yogurt, or a small handful of almonds. Third, eat fatty fish twice this week. Salmon, mackerel, sardines, or trout, prepared without frying. Baked, poached, grilled gently, or from a can packed in water or olive oil. The preparation is not a minor detail. It is the difference between a food that delivers its cognitive benefit and one that largely does not. Fourth, add a small handful of walnuts, about 1 ounce, to your daily routine. Morning with breakfast, midday as a snack, with dinner. Timing matters less than consistency. Make it a daily habit rather than an occasional addition. Fifth, switch to high-quality extra virgin olive oil and use it generously as a finishing drizzle over everything cooked. Salads, vegetables, fish, eggs. Buy it in a dark bottle with a harvest date. If the bottle is clear and undated, it is likely already too degraded to provide the oleocanthal benefit. Budget for better oil and use more of it. This is not an area where the least expensive option serves you equally well. Now I want to hear from you. Of these 5 foods, which one do you already eat regularly? And which one are you going to add this week? Tell me in the comments. Your answer matters because it helps me understand where the real gaps are in what people are actually eating, and that shapes what I cover next. If this video resonated with someone you care about, a parent, a spouse, a friend who has mentioned noticing changes in their memory, please share it with them. The conversation about cognitive protection should not wait until the changes become frightening. It should start now, and it starts with the plate. In the next video, I am going deep on chronic inflammation, the single most powerful driver behind cognitive decline, nerve damage, circulation problems, and accelerated aging across every system in the body. I am going to walk through the specific foods, habits, and measurable markers that address it at the root level. If you have been following this series, that video is the one that ties all of the threads together. Make sure you are subscribed.